And I'm back with a fresh new tank top. Hey, muscle tanks, look for my season. And it's been like a week since I watched the latest episode of The Bachelorette, so you know I don't remember a single goddamn thing that happened. But guess what? I would rather talk about an episode I have no memories of than do the other stuff that I'm supposed to do right now, which includes doing. I actually just did one thing I was supposed to do, which was like talk about my goals and shit and how I did with them over the past year for my end of the year conference with my administrator. I did do that. Did it. I don't know if I did it very well, but I did it. I have to grade some things before tomorrow, so kids know if they're failing or not. And I have to do this big ass portfolio thing to be certified by the state of New York. Then I haven't really started yet. Although the good news is that I filmed something a few weeks ago that the file got. I filmed with this program and then it was gone, and then I was hunting around trying to make space because I have no space on my computer right now, and mysteriously found it along with a bunch of other videos. Actually, I had deleted purposefully, so the files were still there for like everything, the stuff that I thought was deleted on purpose, and the stuff I thought was deleted not on purpose. So that was good actually to find that thing. But I need to do this giant as fuck portfolio, which is due in like 8 days, and I have not started it yet. But I'd much rather not do that and just talk about the latest episode of The Bachelorette, so I can at least have it up before tomorrow's episode. So last week I watched it live because I could. There must have been not much pressing for Tuesday. I must have felt like, no, who cares about what we're doing in school that day? I'm sure we were learning new content. I have no clue. I have what I'm describing as depression brain right now. There is no doubt in my mind that I am 1,000% in a hole of depression. You know, it's like I get myself out of it sometimes, and then I fall back in. And so right now I'm in the depression hole. And my brain is foggy in that way. Like, I've talked about this with my therapist, right? Like, she's like, I'm like, I don't have a brain that's sharp anymore. I used to be really sharp and I could remember things, and I had excellent recall and laser focus. I could do lots of things at the same time, and now like I can't do one thing at a time. I'm like in the middle of something. I'm like, what? Like last week, literally, I was in a room like doing work during my planning period, and I got up to go do something. I left the room. Halfway down the hall, I had to stop and be like, wait, what was I gonna do? I had to go back to the room where I was working, like look at my computer, and then it was like, oh yeah, and then I went and did it. Like, that's where I am right now. I lose train of thought in the middle of conversation. That said, I probably will retain some things about last week's episode of The Bachelorette, even in depression brain. Because one thing I probably may retain more than anything is useless information about heterosexuals. So if I'm remembering correctly, last week's episode started with Demario coming back to the mansion. And this is actually boding very well because I remember his name. Demario comes back to the mansion, and you remember that Rachel had kicked him out after the basketball challenge the week before because he had a girlfriend he didn't disclose. And he lied about it very poorly, and she's a lawyer, and she's smart, and she's perfect, and oh my god. So he comes back to the mansion, she hears him out, and he gives her this whole spiel. That's really just shit. As of course it is. First of all, he's a man. And second of all, he's a man who was caught lying. And if there is anything that I have learned over the last few months, like from our political system, it's that men lie. I didn't actually learn that from our political system. It's something I've just known my whole life. 31 years living in the world. And he was like trying to give her like this runaround, like she must think that she's stupid or something, because his story was shit, and I don't remember too much of it, but I do remember he said something about how like in order for there to be good things you have to go through pain, one of those things, like there's no good without the bad, that sort of thing. And then Rachel like hears him out, and she's like, yeah, and then he stops like his whole spiel, and she's basically like, listen, what I saw yesterday was a boy, and I'm looking for a man, and you know what, maybe you can't have happiness without pain, but I hope that this pain of you not being in the mansion right now will bring you happiness later. And then she basically was like, bye. And is disgusted as I am that Rachel is on the show, because she's so much better than the show. She's given us two really great moments of just like absolute like kicking it in the ass, making these men fucking pay for being shits. Well, Demario for being shit. And she goes back, and the guys are all out there like, oh, Rachel, are you gonna let him back in the house? And she's like, fuck no. And they're all like, yeah. And I'm like, yeah, too. I'm like, Rachel, you have standards. Like, I don't think they're that high because you are on The Bachelorette, and you did have feelings for Nick Viall, or Vile, right? It's Vile, which is the ironic thing, right, about his last name, something like that. Uh, but you have some standards, and I love you. Um, and then what happens? See, this is now where I get kind of, ugh. The group date was in a mud pit. Yeah, there was. Okay, so like her friends come, but her friends right now are only people from The Bachelorette, and most likely everyone who's shown up or is going to be on Bachelor in Paradise. So it was Jasmine, Corinne, crazy Corinne, who I do not believe for 1 second is friends with Rachel because Rachel is not that crazy. Raven, and someone else. Christina. I don't know if Christina was there. Christina was in the first episode. But they like take the men to a mud pit. They wrestle. I didn't like that one so much because Kenny obviously should have won. He's a professional and he clearly dove in the last round against, I think his name is Bryce. I don't fucking know. I don't know who these people are, and I watched this a week ago. What was like? There was a one-on-one. Oh, there was a one-on-one with Anthony, who I swear to God I had never seen before last week before. But he was cute. Young though, he was 26, and they rode horses down Rodeo Drive, and the horses took a shat in a store, and they had ice cream, or a cupcake. They had a cupcake, and that was delicious. I think that the main thing about this episode, oh, and then there was another group date, and they went to see Ellen. I have so many mixed feelings about Ellen. Like, I appreciate so much of what she's done for this community, but I really think that she's kind of like a capitalistic sellout. And a really, like, I don't like the fact that, like, if a kid can sing, they show up on her show and they can get their 15 minutes of fame. And it just feels kind of gross. But she does dance a lot, and people like it, and the men went and stripped. And I just find this really fascinating, actually. I was talking about this with a colleague, and I know I've mentioned this before on one of these podcasts, and possibly it could have been this is not a podcast, my actual podcast, but I think it was here too. I've actually reached the point where I truly don't understand heterosexuality at all. Like, I see men and women together, and I'm actually confused. Like, it doesn't compute to me, mostly because I have centered my life online to make sure that I don't have to see heterosexuality if I don't want to, and I never want to, because I don't want to see men. But, like, the media that I consume is pretty queer, with the exception of, like, these shows. And so it's very confusing to me to see a woman and a man, like, kiss. I don't, like, it's like, wait. So every once in a while I'm just like, wait, people do that? Like, men and women do that sometimes? It's very odd. I don't know where I was going with that, but something about this episode, like, triggered that in me. I was like, oh, people do that? Like, okay. Yeah, see, this is my depression rate. I have no idea where I was going with that or what even triggered the thought. I have no idea what I was talking about before I even said that. Oh, the men were stripping on Ellen. Alex, the Russian Michiganian, I like him. I like his hair, his weird hair, and he wears weird jeans, and he peed in a pool. And who hasn't done that? I actually am not sure that I have, but I probably have, let's be real. Okay, so there's this guy named Eric, and Eric is, I don't recall seeing him before last week, but I think he's been around. She got rid of Freddie, the guy she went to camp with, and he was a bad boy, and he kissed her, and I deliberately don't watch the kissing scenes. It sounded wet. I didn't like the sound of it, and so I'm glad I didn't watch it. But he was all like, wedding bells, and she was all like, ooh, he kisses like a boy, and sent him home. That was embarrassing. I feel bad for him. But he was very mature about it, I have to say. Way more mature than I am. 1,000%. Like, God forbid you even hold my hand and then, like, break my heart. I will explode. I'm not proud of that. I'm not. So I could be more like Freddie. Okay, so Eric. Eric has a bit of a temper, and so there's this guy, like, in the house, right, Lee, and Lee is obviously a flaming racist. He's Southern, and I'm not saying he's a flaming racist because he's Southern, but it doesn't help. And we've seen these inflammatory tweets that have been discovered in the last few weeks of him, like, he was anti-women's march, very pro-Trump, and believes that the Black Lives Matter movement is akin to the KKK, which is weird because he's probably a fan of the KKK, so equating the two is silly. I think, and I'm not sure if I can equate this to him, he also said something about, like, the not the NCAA, the NAACP also being, like, sort of like a racist institution like the KKK. And it's like, okay, you fucking dillweed. But like seeing him, so we know he's a racist, but there's no context yet for that on the show. Um, but his interactions with Eric were really kind of gross to watch, and you can see what's happening here. And it's interesting because it's forcing the show to go in this direction of having to talk about race in a way that they haven't had to ever, even with Rachel being the first Black Bachelorette, because the way that he picks on Eric to make Eric look kind of unstable or aggressive because he's trying to defend himself against really baseless accusations. I think Eric's a weird guy. He really is, and I don't think he really knows how to communicate very well. But there's nothing about him that is threatening. There's nothing about him that is off, and Lee is very clearly trying to poke at him to make him seem like a psychopath. And now that we know about the tweets, I think it's very clearly like racially motivated. Like he's trying to set this picture of Eric as being like a bad, aggressive guy, based mostly just on the fact that he's black. And so he pokes at Eric, and Iggy pokes at Eric. And Iggy, I don't really know what his deal is. He's a really big dude. But they're basically like, I don't think Eric, is here for the right reasons, and fuck if I hate that. But there's a lot of really creepy race stuff going on right now, and it seems like next week they're actually going to address it, because I know somebody like goes to Lee and is like tries to explain to him like, here's why what you're doing is very problematic. And I'm sure that like one thing we need as a country is for white people to understand, like, if you paint a picture of a black man being this way, it taps into this very deep history of institutionalized racism that basically makes it okay for cops then to go out and kill black men with no repercussions, and black women with no repercussions. But at the same time, it's not black people's job to educate white people about this. So I feel a lot of ways about it, and we'll see how it actually plays out on the show. One thing I need to mention is that she also sent the Waboom guy home and the other guy home, the guy who bragged about having sex for 15 minutes a day. Oh my god, what a fucking loser. They were very antagonistic toward each other, and the Waboom guy, whose name I cannot think of right now, is very weird, thinks he's hilarious in like a Jim Carrey style, and let's be real, Jim Carrey has not been funny for decades. Literally told Rachel when she pulled him aside to talk to him, that, is this, I don't remember either of their names. The really bad sex guy was standing over him in the middle of the night eating a banana. Now, this is problematic for this main reason, and then not problematic for another. I'll start with the non-problematic. It was hilarious because Rachel, like, listens to him very calmly. She's so poised, and is like, did he eat the whole thing? And then, like, pretends like she's taking him seriously when she clearly is not. And I give her credit for that, because that actually made it kind of funny. But here's the thing too, is that the fact that this show always is skirting around, I think, in a lot of ways, this ideal of queerness, and what's his name, the Waboom guy, is painting the bad sex guy as like, I don't know, perverted or weird because maybe he has a crush on me. He was standing over me eating a banana, as though queerness, bisexuality would be a weird thing in and of itself, and if he's doing this very weird thing, it must mean he must have a crush on me, which he's like describing it in ways that makes him kind of predatory and very much a creep. And the show doesn't comment on that fact, that he's trying to throw him under the bus by suggesting that his sexuality is anything but straight, because he plays it off as being like serious. He's not playing it as a joke, even though it's very clearly a lie. That's a problem. Bachelor and Bachelorette. Last year on The Bachelor, there were a couple, or at least one, I can't remember her name now, Jamie, yes I can, because she was bisexual, she was queer, I remember her name, Jamie, who's bisexual, and she sort of used that to sort of like titillate Nick, like, oh yes, I've been with women, it's not a badge of honor, first of all, women, for you to have been with women, and men if you've been men, like, if you're gonna use it to try to sexually arouse someone of the other sex, like, honestly, fuck you. I don't approve of you using your sexuality, which is very valid in that way. But the show itself doesn't know how to deal with queerness in a very weird, real way, and I think that sucks. We had the Black Bachelorette. You would think that maybe one day we could have like a bisexual bachelorette, or even a full-on queer, like, lesbian bachelorette or a gay bachelor. That would be awesome. And hopefully it wouldn't be as creepy as, like, Tila Tequila was. But we're not there, as evidenced by this episode, where that was used, and no one called it out for being homophobic. Not even Rachel, who I absolutely love and adore. So let's get it together. And it turns out I remember a lot more than I thought. Depression brain or not. Trash GGV, it just stinks. So I'll see you guys next week. And maybe I'll go and do work now. Probably not.